Good evening and welcome. You're watching NDTV. I'm Vedant Agarwal. Our special focus on the show this evening. In October last year, India's fight for marriage equality reached a pit stop. After a long legal battle that saw debates around the right to union for queer couples becoming a part of drawing room conversations, the Supreme Court, though, fell short of recognizing same-sex marriages. Many months later, there's a silver lining for the queer community again. The Supreme Court may consider a private hearing or an in-chamber hearing, as it were, for the review petitions that argue that the verdict is self-contradictory and against the fundamental rights of queer individuals. Even as mainstream discourse may have moved on, the fight for marriage equality continues in silence. As the queer Indians fight the good fight, on the show this evening, we ask, will the rainbow find a place in the sun? Joining me first on the show this evening, Karuna Nandi, Senior Advocate of the Supreme Court, somebody who's leading several of the matters and a very articulate voice who's been leading the fight for marriage equality. Ms. Nandi, thanks very much for speaking with us. My first question to you, break it down for us. What do the review petitions entail? What can the queer community and what can we expect from the Supreme Court in the next week?
Thank you for keeping a focus on this issue. Thank you to NDTV. I want to be clear that I am not the only one who is leading this fight. There are a number of excellent counsels who have been doing this for decades. There's Dr. Abhishek Singhvi, there's Saurabh Kirpal, there's Menika Guruswamy, a large number of very, very excellent people who have also filed review petitions. Now, the review petitions, we must remember, are limited to errors on the face of the record. We have argued that there are a number of errors, that the majority judgment is contradictory to the extent that it recognizes that there is discrimination, for example, and does not provide a remedy for it. Indeed, it is important also to remember, and in this interview, and I will only be elaborating on what is before the court.
Yes.
Because in the interest of open justice, because of course we do not wish to comment on the issue that is sub judice. So it's important to remember that even the minority judgment, the judgment of just the Chief Justice and Justice Kaul, does not in fact allow queer marriage. Does not allow marriage equality. And the reason that we speak of marriage equality and queer marriage is because while earlier the petitions that came before us were speaking of same-sex marriage, we are now across the board, I think, for the most part, talking about trans marriage as well.
Yes.
To the extent that a trans marriage is heterosexual. So, for example, if there is a person who now identifies as a woman and wants to marry somebody who currently identifies as a man, then that is something that is legal under the present law. And that is recognized earlier. It was in the Arun Kumar judgment, and it possibly had more limited ramifications. Now that is national.
Right.
But even the minority judgment, we must be clear, would, if that becomes a majority judgment, would recognize that there is a right to, say, a civil union and leave it to a committee of government. And also, but there are other significant ramifications. For example, the right for a child who has been adopted by a queer couple to have that relationship with both parents be recognized.
Yes.
So this is significant. It will be, the fight is not in silence. It is true that the mainstream media kind of focuses from time to time, but there are queer communities across the country whose lives that it affects every day.
And let me interrupt you briefly there, Ms. Nandi. Very quickly, in the Supreme Court, what it said in its verdict essentially sort of many would say, shrugged off responsibility or a constitutional obligation, and the ball now is, as many would say, in the government's court. So what essentially could change potentially with this review petition?
So potentially with this review petition, adoption, the right to a civil union could come about. Now, that's not insignificant. That really is very significant, right?
Right.
But also the right to adopt.
Okay.
That's extremely significant.
Yes.
Right.
So of course,
and there are other things also in the minority judgment that do take the fight forward. So, if the Honorable Supreme Court decides to find in our favor in the review petition, the rights of the queer community are going to be bolstered significantly.
Absolutely. And Ms. Nandi, as many of you and many of the petitioners have also pointed out, that this one right to union actually opens up a plethora of rights. Thanks very much for putting that in perspective for us. In fact, I have a wonderful panel this evening as well. Zainab Patel, a trans rights activist and petitioner, is also with us on the show. Utkarsh Saxena, a petitioner and lawyer in the marriage equality litigation, a development economist as well, is joining us as well. Also, Mario Da Penha, a petitioner, is on the panel as well. Thanks all very much for joining us on the show this evening. Utkarsh, coming to you first, in one of your interviews, you said that even if, the Supreme Court does not rule the way you expect it to, the fact that the sting out of the conversation was taken out, the fact that this became a drawing room conversation, that is a big achievement as well, and you will continue to fight for your rights. At this stage, where does the fight for marriage equality stand?
Right, thanks for that. I think the first thing I'd like to just add one bit to Karuna's point on, just to put the review in context, is that if you think about the 377 litigation, we were unsuccessful in 2013. The court ruled against us. And then 5 years later, and at that stage as well, the court said that it was in the parliament's domain, that it was beyond their scope of judicial review to get into this space. And yet 5 years later, the very same court with the same law, with no change in the doctrine of separation of powers, changed its view, and in fact, in Justice Indu Malhotra's opinion, apologized for the fact that this discrimination existed against the community for so many years. So exactly the same could happen now. If we are successful legally, it will obviously be a huge development for the community. But if not, we will keep persevering and try to fight this battle another day, because the queer community knows this journey of ups and downs better than any other community. And we are confident that someday the court's going to side with us on this constitutionally.
Right, and before I bring in my other panelists, you have emphasized this often, that, the terminology around this fight for same-sex marriage, we call it marriage equality here. Why is that significant?
Well, because the idea is that it's about removing discrimination of all forms against all persons. So it's not just about marriage between a man or a woman, or marriage between two men or two women, but marriage of all sorts, including between trans persons, as Karuna was just talking about, and also the bouquet of rights that comes with the right, with the institution of marriage, because it is the gateway to get legal recognition, financial protections, tax remedies, and most importantly, the right to start a family. So for all those reasons, same-sex marriage is just a subset of the larger battle that we are fighting. And true victory will be when all these dimensions of marriage and allied rights are given to the community.
Absolutely. Mario Da Penha is also with us, one of the petitioners in the case. What do you expect of the Supreme Court? Many would point out that, this isn't a very significant development, given the fact that the Supreme Court will consider an open court hearing only if there's merit in the review petition. But what is your expectation of the Supreme Court at this stage of the fight?
Vedant, thank you so much for having me on your show and for, as Karuna said, shining a light on the issue. The queer community has long had a tumultuous love affair with the law. And just because the law hasn't always...
That's an interesting choice of words, might I add, yeah.
I think so. And just because the law hasn't loved us back, it doesn't mean that we love it any less. And so I and most of the queer community have nothing but hope when we approach the courts. And so we approach the courts again next week with hope, with that hope in mind.
Absolutely. And, Zainab Patel is also with us, a transgender rights activist. One thing that perhaps is one is almost flummoxed, because the Supreme Court, the kind of reluctance with which it approaches matters about homosexuality. You know, the Supreme Court has in the past upheld trans marriages that, in a sense, many would say mirror, heterosexual marriages. But why this reluctance around homosexuality and homosexual unions? Do you see that there's a lack of understanding as far as the courts are concerned when it comes to homosexual unions? As a trans rights activist.
Yes, I definitely feel when it comes to and thank you, Vedant. I must say that for very openly talking about the issue of marriage equality and not same-sex marriage, like many of your peers within the press would and the media circle would wrongly address this entire case, because the entire thing, and it's based on this one premise about equality and marriage equality for all. I think when it comes to homosexual relationship, whether it is a male with a male or a female with a female, there is a lot of inhibition in people's mind. And I'll actually point out a very significant part of the arguments made in the Kaushal case, the Section 377 case. People say, oh, the society would get destroyed and people would have sex like animals on the road, and this would lead down to the breakdown of family. Nothing like this. I think this was just pure for fear mongering in terms of a societal collapse. I don't know how two people who've loved each other and want to solidify their relationship through a legal lens. And again, pointing out to what Utkarsh said, it's not only about the right to marry, but to enjoy the rights granted within the marriage. So one is the right to marry and the rights of marriage. And I think one important point that probably Utkarsh did not mention is protection against violence, whether it is familial violence or domestic violence and intimate partner violence. There is no protection. And if the court decides to say, yes, we understand that there has been discrimination against this community, but we cannot do so. At least my prayers, and I'm not privy to the prayers of everyone, is actually asking the court that if there is a failure to remedy the continuing discrimination, this is a patent error, and this needs to be corrected.
Absolutely. And Utkarsh, while of course we speak to you as a petitioner in the case, this entire fight for marriage equality has a personal bearing, on your life as well. You've been, in a relationship with your partner, Kotia, for the past 15 years, if I'm not wrong. Is there heartbreak in that sense, or are you hopeful? Because we have come a long way in many senses, but given the fact that you're personally involved in the case, a lot around your life, a lot in your personal life also depends on this particular case. What are your feelings at this point? Are you heartbroken? Are you hopeful? Are you cautiously optimistic?
Look, firstly, as a lawyer, I'll just say that we disagree with the court's argument that we were asking for any special rights. The institution of marriage always existed, and we just asked for access and the removal of discrimination to access the right. So that fundamental basis that they can't create a new institution, we disagree with. That was not our prayer. But to address the personal bit that you're asking for and to take the law away, because it's very easy to intellectualize this and oppose us and our rights. To humanize it, Kotia and I met 16 years ago, actually now, this month in Delhi University as young undergrads, fell in love and have been in a loving relationship for the last 16 years. And if it wasn't for the law, we would have been married by now, have had the opportunity to celebrate this legally with our families and friends, have had kids and would have been able to start a family. It is absolutely heartbreaking and painful that we can't experience the same joys. And that's why I would urge your viewers to think about that first day when you held your child in your hands in the delivery ward, or when you got married, or when you went to your kids' sports day and read a story to them before they went to bed. We want to experience exactly those same pleasures and are unfortunately not allowed because of who we are and because of our innate attributes. And that's absolutely painful. It's offensive, it's discriminatory, and does not allow us to live our full lives. So this is personal, this is emotional. We are trying very hard to find ways to start a family and are really struggling, and hope that the law, either now we understand the review window, which is pretty narrow and the standard of proof is high, or in another litigation round allows us that opportunity to live like anybody else in society.
And while we talk about the emotional reasons, there are also pragmatic reasons behind wanting to get married. The basic things like having to transfer money into your partner's bank account, to, of course, the rights to adopt a child and start a family. There are very sort of pertinent pragmatic reasons as well behind the need to get married.
Absolutely. Just day-to-day transactions that straight couples take for granted. As you said, sending money to each other's accounts, how you file taxes, health insurance. We can't put each other on each other's health insurance by our employers. It complicates life a lot. And those are, of course, difficult, complicate your day-to-day life. But I have to say that for a lot of the couples, it's also just about the right to adopt and start a family and experience those joys of life.
Absolutely. And Madhya Penha come in on this, because why I wanted to discuss this issue this evening is because even incremental change or incremental progress is extremely important in the fight for marriage equality. We have come a long way after 377 was and homosexuality was decriminalized. We have come a long way. Even the fact that these conversations have become part of drawing room discussions is progress enough, and slowly but surely we are progressing, which is why even a review petition like this is important. Even the fact that the Supreme Court is considering an open court hearing of the review petition is significant.
Absolutely. And at the very basis of a lot of this discussion is a quest for dignity, really. Marriage, civil unions, whatever word you may want to use, it really is a quest for the dignity of the couples involved. I'm also a queer rights activist. And even after Section 377 has gone, parents have often tried to separate their queer children from the people they love. And even though, the 377 is no longer law, the police often steps in and helps these parents. And sometimes I wonder if the marriage equality existed, or we had the same rights as heterosexual couples in India, the same dignity would accrue to queer couples as well. And so it really is a real world ask that we've put before the Honorable Court.
Zainab Patel, I'd like you to talk a little bit about how life has changed for you, in the past couple of years, and the fact that you at least have the law by your side. You at least know that your right to civil union is something that is constitutionally and legally recognized. How does that make a difference, to a trans person?
Vedant, I would like to just draw your attention to the fact that I already got married to my partner in 2015 when India was battling homosexuality in the courts. My partner, who was from Mumbai, we went to South Africa. We had a civil union. I completed my gender affirming surgery. I got a name change. I took on my partner's name and his surname. I had insurance. I had a joint bank account. We had property together. And of course, we separated. All of this is part of my petition. Now, the question that I have is that we live in two Indias. The two Indias is where in particular corporates, where they have been able to arm twist insurance providers to allow same-sex partners or live-in partners to be included in the insurance, or certain financial institutions like Axis, etc., which allows you to open a joint bank account with your partner. But can that be seen for the whole of India, for the entire categorization of people? No. Even today, we keep on getting so many requests for information. How do we go and get married with my partner? That the test of the pudding is in eating it. Tomorrow, yes. Can I go to a gurudwara? Can I go to a church? Can I go to a mosque, to a temple, and ask to get married with my partner? And if I am denied under the personal laws or under the Special Marriage Act, then that would be and we've not seen that many cases that have come up in terms of being denied or being provided the opportunity to register their marriage. So while the law is there and has existed, I think the challenge is for it to pick up speed, to be able to go to court. I mean, for an ordinary citizen to go to court, it's not an easy not an easy thing to get married. So I think while the law is there and it's been there now for some time, the question is, can you really go ahead and apply it to all? And what happens to when a court registrar or a priest or a Maulvi decides not to do this? Then the question is, who do we go back to? We cannot come to the court again. I think there has to be a limit to the times
which is
we as
why this
ordinary
entire
citizens—
debate is centered around this, the Special Marriages Act as well, and sort of doing away with any sort of allegiance to anything that can perhaps potentially be an impediment to the right to civil union. But Utkarsh, the last word to you. Relive the past 7-8 months for us. I was there at the Supreme Court when the verdict came out, and what I saw around me was disillusionment, was heartbreak. But how have you come to terms with the verdict? What is your strategy perhaps going forward? Relive those past few months for us.
Well, I would say I think the day of the judgment was obviously heartbreaking. We were hopeful. There was a lot of positive discussion. It was live telecast, and there was a lot of support. And we thought there was a great opportunity for the court to legalize this. So after that kind of, I think, a momentum, it was a setback. The next day, actually, Kodia and I, on sort of the nudging of my mother, went and got engaged outside the courtroom to sort of just redefine the narrative for ourselves and say that, look, the court may choose not to recognize us legally, but we've always existed. We will continue to exist, and we will find our small ways to express ourselves and claim these spaces in society. But that's really all that we can do. We really want to start a family, to be honest. We really want to be parents, and it is heartbreaking and frustrating that the law is against us, and we have to find ways to do it. A lot of our friends urge us, saying, why don't you leave the country? Why don't you start a family outside the country? But that's not an option for us. This is our home, and we want to be here and raise a family here. And the fact that we can't access that is frustrating. It's a day-to-day reminder, while all our friends and everyone else in society moves on with their lives. So it's been difficult, it's been challenging, but I think you have to step back and remind yourself that in the longer arc of history, this is part of the process. There was a setback in 2013 and then joy in 2018. And similarly, hopefully, when there was a setback in 2023, we're trying to figure out when there will be that moment of joy for the community when we see marriage equality in the country.
Absolutely, and that's a wonderful note to end the discussion on. Thanks all very much for joining us, Utkarsh, Madhu Penha, and also all of you for joining us this evening. Karna Nandi was also with us earlier today. Zainab, thanks very much. I forgot, your name slipped off my mind. But thanks all very much, not just for joining me this evening, but also for fighting the good fight. With that, we'll take a short break now, but news continues on the other side.